Navigating the intricacy of the DC Comics timeline and continuity is akin to embarking on a journey through a multiverse of heroes, villains, and cosmic events. Spanning decades of storytelling, DC's narrative landscape is a mosaic of reboots, retcons, and parallel universes, offering both complexity and depth to its iconic characters and mythos. Understanding the complex details of this expansive universe requires unraveling the threads of time, exploring pivotal events, and deciphering the ever-evolving nature of continuity. We are the Hive Mind, and in this video we plan to do just that, while also clearing up the controversy and adding light to what is actually canon and applicable to use for DC's continuity. But before we get into the actual topic of this video, very quickly, it would be very appreciated if you guys would head over to my gaming channel and subscribe. Also, head over to my boy King Six's gaming channel and subscribe. We've been working hard on these channels for multiple months at a time, and it would, again, be very, very appreciated if you guys would head over and subscribe.
Kicking off the Golden Age, we have Action Comics #1, which was the introduction of Superman by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. The Golden Age of DC Comics lasted from late 1930s to the mid-1950s. This is the era of what introduced the world to the idea of superheroes, forever shaping the genre. Following the debut of Superman, characters like Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Arrow, and Dr. Fate made a splash on the page. We also saw the debut characters of like the Flash, Green Lantern, just not the versions we will come to know today. This era also saw the formation of the Justice Society of America, the first superhero team in history, solidifying the superhero team dynamic. Speaking of laying the foundation for the future, the character of Dick Grayson as Robin was introduced as a child sidekick for Batman, which led to the rise of superhero sidekicks and led to the implementation of Batman's moral code, as now more young people were reading Batman comics. The Golden Age laid the foundation for DC Comics, enduring legacy and established comic books as a powerful new medium.
And now we have the Silver Age of DC Comics, which spanned from the 1950s to the early 1970s. And this witnessed a more lighthearted superhero revival. DC Comics ushered into this new era with the introduction of the modern versions of the Flash and Green Lantern being Barry Allen and Hal Jordan. This revitalized existing heroes with more sci-fi elements, and it breathed new life into the genre, especially with the introduction of the multiverse, which revealed that the characters that we followed in the Golden Age were actually inhabitants of another universe called Earth 2, while the Silver Age characters are on a universe labeled Earth 1, and those characters would be the ones that we follow up until today. And the Silver Age also saw the formation of new superhero teams, such as the Justice League of America, with the founding members being Barry Allen's Flash, Hal Jordan's Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and the Martian Manhunter. And later on, both Batman and Superman would join their ranks. Additionally, there was the first version of the Teen Titans, which was led by Robin and included various teen sidekicks, such as Kid Flash, Wonder Girl, Aqualad, and Speedy. In this era, what would come to be known as the Bat Family was also formed with the introduction of Alfred Pennyworth and Barbara Gordon, aka Batgirl. We would also receive the first multiverse team-up crossover with the Justice League meeting the Justice Society in what would become to known as the first ever Crisis.
The Bronze Age of DC Comics, running from the early 1970s to the mid-1980s, marked a shift towards a darker, more complex narrative. Social issues and real-world problems began to seep into superhero stories, with characters grappling with themes of addiction, racism, and environmentalism. This era saw the rise of iconic storylines such as the rise of Nightwing in Teen Titans The Judas Contract, the social commentary of Green Lantern Green Arrow, the introduction of Ra's al Ghul in the League of Assassins in the Demon Trilogy, and of course, Alan Moore's exploration of the Swamp Thing. This was also a period of artistic innovation, with Jack Kirby's arrival at DC introducing the idea of the Fourth World, which expanded on the cosmology of the DC universe with the introduction of new gods such as Highfather, Orion, Mr. Miracle, and of course, Darkseid. The Bronze Age came to a close with the monumental event, Crisis on Infinite Earths. In this storyline, it was revealed that there was an infinite multiverse out there which was being eviscerated at the hands of the Anti-Monitor, a being who wanted to destroy all life. In the fight to stop the Anti-Monitor, Barry Allen and Kara Zor-El sacrificed themselves, leaving the world without the Flash and Supergirl. Eventually, the heroes were able to defeat the Anti-Monitor when a new Dr. Light and the original Superman from Earth 2 combined their efforts in a final stand. Afterwards, Alexander Luthor created a pocket dimension for himself, Earth 2 Superman, Earth 2 Lois Lane, and Superboy Prime to live in. Meanwhile, all of the remaining Earths were merged into a new universe called New Earth, which was the start of a new era without any of the complication of Elseworld stories.
The era spanning from the 1980s to 2011 in the DC Universe marked a period of dynamic change and innovation. This era is often referred to as post-crisis. First, we're going to cover what occurred in the late 80s and the 90s. This is the era where Wally West, the Kid Flash, took up the mantle of the main Flash, which explored many aspects of the Flash mythos. Most importantly, the Speed Force, which was introduced by popular comic book writer Mark Waid. Obviously, the Flash was not the only hero to receive an expansion to his mythos, as Wonder Woman was reimagined into what we know her as today in George Perez's seminal run on her character. In addition to that, we had the popular retelling of Batman's origin story known as Batman Year One. This story obviously kept some of the core elements of Batman's origin, but also added new elements such as characters like Carmine Falcone and the whole mob conflict during the actual story itself. Since we're on the topic of the Dark Knight, it is noteworthy to mention that this era would not be kind to him at all, as one of the first things that happened is that Bruce adopts a child who is attempting to steal the tires off of the Batmobile named Jason Todd. Bruce would train this boy in all aspects of crime fighting and would make him the second Robin. Unfortunately, tragedy would strike as the Joker tricks Jason Todd into entering a warehouse where he would beat, torture, and eventually kill the second boy Wonder. Shortly after the tragic events of Death in the Family, Joker would also shoot Barbara Gordon, which caused her to lose the ability to continue being Batgirl. These back-to-back events pushed Batman to his limits and almost made him break his no-kill rule. Batman in this era became more unhinged and violent, which caught the attention of a young man named Tim Drake, who deduced the identity of Batman and Robin a few years prior. He was able to track down Dick Grayson to ask him to return as Robin in order to help Bruce heal, but Dick refused. Realizing that there was no other way, he decided to don the Robin costume and become the new partner of Batman. As you can tell, this era was also defined by making our heroes feel significant loss. Outside of the death of Jason Todd, the biggest example of such was the death of Superman at the hands of Doomsday. This event didn't just shock readers, but the entire world, as one of the most iconic and popular superheroes of all time had died. Following the death of Superman, Batman would also encounter the steroid-obsessed villain known as Bane, who literally broke him physically and mentally. All while the Emerald Gladiator Hal Jordan had experienced the loss of his entire city, which allowed the fear entity of Parallax to overtake him and destroy the Green Lantern Corps. Though our beloved heroes experienced great loss during this time, new characters rose up such as Steel, Superboy, Kyle Rayner as the new Green Lantern, Cassandra Cain as the new Batgirl, John Paul Valley as Azrael, and as Batman for a short period of time, Connor Hawke as the new Green Arrow, and many more.
Next up is the remaining half of Post-Crisis, otherwise known as the Pre-New 52. If the first half was a deconstruction of the characters, this era would be considered their reconstruction or their rebirth. The original founding members came together and reformed the Justice League, and after that we had the return of Jason Todd as Red Hood, who would one day become a hero again. Green Lantern Rebirth brought Hal Jordan back from the clutches of Parallax and expanded the mythos of the Lanterns, showing off all the different colors using power across the emotional spectrum. This era also saw two major events for the DC Universe, the first of which was called Infinite Crisis. In this event, almost every hero combined their efforts to defeat Superboy Prime, who had been manipulated by Alexander Luthor to punch reality in order to escape from the pocket dimension, and because of this, a new multiverse was created, but instead of there being infinite Earths, there were only 52. The main new Earth of DC was now renamed to Earth Zero, and the next event was Final Crisis, which was focused on Darkseid achieving his long-sought-after anti-life equation. And during this, a whole multiverse of heroes rallied behind Superman in a miracle machine, and were able to defeat true-form Darkseid, but not without loss, most significantly being Batman. But this event also marked the resurrection of Barry Allen. After this point, Dick Grayson took over the mantle of Batman and made Damian Wayne, who's the biological son of Bruce Wayne and Talia al Ghul, into Robin. We also saw how Green Lantern dealt with the prophesized Blackest Night, where almost every dead hero was revived as a Black Lantern to wreak havoc, and were only defeated when the sacred entity, known as the Entity, awoke and made all the dead heroes into White Lanterns of Life in order to defeat the death entity known as Necron. This era came to a close with the event of Flashpoint, where Barry Allen traveled back in time to save his mother, but inadvertently caused the entire timeline to change drastically. After Barry realized the error of his ways, he stopped his past self from creating the Flashpoint timeline, and seemingly created a new timeline in his stead.
Originally thought to be the cause of Barry Allen's time-traveling shenanigans, this new timeline known as the New 52, which took place from 2011 to 2015, was revealed to actually be the machination of Dr. Manhattan from the Watchmen universe. Because of this, in the new timeline, DC characters are younger and a lot of their history is altered drastically. This is the same Earth Zero as post-crisis, but our heroes are just younger and don't remember anything that happened. In this new timeline, we are also introduced a new concept in the mythos of characters such as the Court of Owls to Batman an expansion to the creation of the Amazons, and a completely new version of Earth 2. This new timeline also brought on new threats, as the Justice League is now formed when Darkseid invades Earth and includes Cyborg on the team instead of Martian Manhunter. We also see the heroes fight against evil versions of themselves from Earth 3, where many villains such as Lex Luthor, Black Adam, and Captain Cold are not as cold, no pun intended, and heartless as they initially seemed. The final event of the era was something called the Darkseid War, which saw Darkseid going to war against the Anti-Monitor. During this, members of the Justice League, including Batman, Superman, Flash, Shazam, and Green Lantern, became gods of knowledge, strength, death, gods, and light respectively.
So after the New 52 pretty much being a hard reboot for DC, it was pretty much take it or leave it to the new origins and the new characterization for most people. And unfortunately, a lot of people just didn't like the new changes within the New 52. They preferred the classic post-crisis characters that they've been with since the 80s. So now that DC realized that they messed up and people aren't going to keep buying their books, they had to figure out a way to bring back the elements of post-crisis within the current timeline. That's where DC Rebirth comes in. This event acts as sort of a soft reboot. But with this soft reboot brought a lot of retcons. It was retconned to Doomsday Clock that Dr. Manhattan is the reason New 52 happened. I'll get into that more soon. But just know that some force within the universe reacted to Dr. Manhattan's changes and tried to fix itself. This brought back characters like Wally West into the main timeline. With Wally West being restored, a lot of post-crisis memories were restored to characters that know of Wally. And for some smaller events, it was just retconned altogether that these events always existed within the New 52. The first major event that we get within Rebirth is the Dark Knight's Metal event. This introduced the Dark Multiverse, which is essentially the negative side of the multiverse. This event led into JLA 2018, where we got to learn more about the cosmology and how it was created. We got introduced to characters like the World Forger and Perpetua, where we got to learn the history of the multiverse. Before the conclusion of Perpetua within Death Metal, we got another event known as Doomsday Clock. This event is where DC fully reverted the changes with the New 52 and Rebirth. After discovering that Earth Zero is the metaverse and every other multiverse in creation reacts to that Earth, he decided that he would revert every change he made to the timeline. He destroyed Earth Zero and in turn recreated the timeline. Now within this timeline, we merged together Post-Crisis and New 52. Hence why we have the JSA back within this current timeline. But it wasn't until Death Metal, where we conclude the fight against Perpetua and the Darkest Night, where all the characters' memories of Post-Crisis were restored to them. So now, both continuities are effectively merged together, with all the characters from Earth Zero remembering their post-crisis selves and their current selves. This event also created the Omniverse. Now there's an infinite amount of Earths within the Aurora worlds, and each Earth is home to an infinite amount of timelines. Essentially, each Earth has its own multiverse of timelines, and there's a multiverse of these Earths, creating an infinite set of an infinite multiverse. To avoid confusion, any story that takes place on a separate Earth within the multiverse was given a black label to the comic. For example, the Three Jokers storyline was given a black label to indicate it is not canon to Prime Earth.
After the restoration of all the histories and memories for the characters of the DC universe, the next initiative for DC was known as Infinite Frontier. This era kicked off with a glimpse into one of the many possible futures of Earth Zero, known as Future State. This dystopian reality explored a future where our main DC heroes had undergone immense tragedy, but had new heroes there to step up and take the mantle of our beloved icons. This era for DC was originally going to be something completely different, known as 5G, but due to writer pushback, it was cancelled. However, a lot of the ideas were repurposed for Future State. As a result, this era of DC was more of a buffer period to allow DC to plan their next few years. As a send-off to this brief period in DC, they focused on its main theme of legacy for their next crisis, Dark Crisis. This event focused on the next generation of heroes led by Nightwing as they deal with the death of the Justice League. Nightwing's nemesis, Deathstroke, was the main force spearheading the cosmic power of the Great Darkness in order to snuff out the light provided by our heroes. This event was a return to form for a lot of characters, explaining why their legacy was so important. This coincided with how the multiverse was returned to an infinite one.
We now move to Dawn of DC, which is the current age for DC Comics. This is marking a fresh start for DC following the major events of Dark Crisis. A lot of new runs have started in this era to re-establish the characterization of their core characters and provide new runs for lesser known characters ranging from Blue Beetle to Hawk Girl to Green Arrow, etc., etc. As of this era, Nightwing and the Titans are being pushed as the flagship team of the company, though for the most part the actual runs of these characters are good and push these characters in new and interesting directions. What many people dislike about this era is the constant crossover events, which seem to cause nothing of note to happen. Since the start of the dawn of DC in 2023, there have been 6 crossover events either that happened or that have been announced. These events are Lazarus Planet, Night Terrors, Gotham War, Titans Beast World, House of Brainiac, and Absolute Power. Outside of the excessive crossover events, this era so far has been widely well received and proved to show that DC has a bright future ahead of them. And with all of DC's main timeline history being canon, the sky's the limit with the amount of stories that they can tell.
That is the complete comprehensive guide to the DC timeline. Make sure to leave a like and comment down below and subscribe for more comic videos in the future. We are the Hive Mind and we'll catch you on the next video.